I went to art school. I earned my BFA in graphic design 13 years ago. And lately, over the past year, I've seriously considered going back for an MFA. I looked into programs in illustration, comics, and visual storytelling. Some of the faculty were artists in the industry I deeply admired. I imagined what it would be like to study from them firsthand and be in a focused environment surrounded by others with similar goals. But then reality set in. Most of these programs cost upwards of $60,000 a year with a 2 to 3 year time commitment. That's a lot of time, money, and sacrifice, especially while working full-time and trying to maintain a balanced and healthy lifestyle. So I asked myself, is going back to art school the only way? What if I created my own MFA on my terms, my schedule, and my budget? That's exactly what I did. And today I'm going to share with you how I built my own DIY MFA and how you can too. I want to give you a little context before I tell you how I built my own DIY MFA. I already am a creative professional. I've worked for years as a graphic designer across branding, marketing, and product design in multiple industries. But despite all of that, I've felt creatively unfulfilled for a long time. I've considered different creative pivots over the years, and I've realized what I really want is to get into visual storytelling and create my own graphic novel. I've always loved books, reading, collecting, and admiring them. And combining writing and visual storytelling has always felt like a natural pull. That's why I started exploring MFA programs in comics and visual storytelling. I looked into the Center for Cartoon Studies in Vermont, the MFA Comics program at California College of the Arts in San Francisco, and the Illustration and Visual Storytelling program from the School of Visual Arts in New York. I even reached out to admissions, attended live info sessions, and had a one-on-one call with the admissions director from CCS. These weren't hypothetical thoughts. I was seriously considering it. I imagined myself doing one of these programs while working full-time remotely. But the more I thought about it, the more overextended I felt. And honestly, living like a student in a small town in Vermont for 2 years just didn't feel right. And quitting my job to go back to school full-time, well, that was out of the question. I'm realistic, but I didn't want to ignore this creative urge. So instead of replacing my career, I wanted to add to it with something more fulfilling. And that's when I asked, how can I get the education I want and need to achieve the goal I want? So why didn't I go back to art school? Let's talk about the obvious stuff first. Most MFA programs cost at least $60,000 a year. That's a huge financial investment. And time-wise, you're looking at a minimum of 2 to 3 years. There are some low residency options. For example, CCA in San Francisco has a 3-summer intensive of about 5 weeks. We're coming in every day for classes, and then the rest of the year is self-guided thesis work. But more than that, I just couldn't ignore the lifestyle mismatch. As I mentioned, I'm already a creative professional, and I've worked hard to build a life that gives me time to travel, maintain a balanced, healthy lifestyle, and pursue creative projects on my own terms. And the truth is, I didn't want to pause all of that for a life in a classroom. If the ultimate goal is to write and illustrate a graphic novel, do I really need another degree to get there? Or can I figure out another path for myself? So here's what I did instead. I reverse engineered the process. I started with the goal to create a graphic novel. Then I broke that down into all the skills and knowledge areas I need to get there. Storytelling, sequential art, illustration, writing, publishing, and of course feedback. There are 3 key aspects to creating your own MFA and achieving similar results. The first thing I did was enroll in a continuing art education class. It's funny, I actually found out about these by doing a Google search. At the time, I was interested in looking for ceramics class near me, and then I realized that there were a bunch of other continuing art education classes. So that's initially how I found out about the ones local to me. I enrolled into a 6-week in-person Intro to Comics class at a Bay Area university. It met once a week for 2 hours in person for 6 weeks and gave me hands-on practical information. So why is this important? I learned a lot from this class and I really enjoyed it. I actually reached out to the instructor ahead of time because I noticed that she was teaching a lot of similar classes at different art schools and universities. So I wanted to get her input and see which one suited me best. There were were a few key elements in this classroom environment that are important with these continuing art education classes that you seek out. The first is they will start with a little bit of instruction, so that week maybe it's focusing on something specific that you're learning, and there's a lot of in-class activities, drawings, and warm-ups, and then there's working on larger projects and critiquing them. And in this class, I worked mainly on 3 projects throughout the 6 weeks, which is actually a lot considering how short of a time frame that is. The first was a simple 4-panel diary comic. Diary comics are pretty common and well known. Essentially, it's taking things that happen in your life and creating a simple 4-panel comic about it. The next was working on a character based on an inanimate object and creating a story over a 2-page comic. And the third and final project was based on a rule. You can choose whatever you wanted, but something to stretch yourself. So some of the examples that others chose were no dialogue, no panels. I happened to choose multiple perspectives because I really wanted to push myself and draw things from different perspectives and just think about various ways of telling a story. So that was my rule. And then creating another 2-page comic on whatever story you wanted, as long as it used that rule. I'm really proud of the projects I created over this short 6-week course. I learned a lot, but the most important thing is that I practiced the skill of comics and graphic novel storytelling. I also enrolled in an 8-week online class for making comics, and I was curious to compare how the online format would compare to in-person. Which would I prefer and get more out of? I'm about halfway through the online course, but so far what I can say is I really enjoy the in-person aspect a lot more, and you do get a lot more out of it. When I went to art school, all of my art fundamental and major courses, I took them in person, the exception being maybe a few English composition and US history classes. Some of those I took online because I didn't feel it was worth the cost of commuting into the city to take those classes in the summer. I'd rather just save the money and do them online. And to be honest, at that time, I didn't feel online education was as good as it is now. I just don't think I would have gotten as much out of an online art education at that time. Now it's a little bit different. And some of the reasons why I prefer the in-person format versus online is you just get a lot more out of it when you're in the room with the instructor and other students. There's more opportunities and chances for questions and organic conversations that are a lot harder to replicate in an online Zoom environment where you have to unmute yourself or raise your hand. It just makes it a little bit more difficult. And also you have opportunities to talk to the instructor before or after. Sometimes I arrived early to my class and I would be able to have a few minutes to talk and ask questions with the instructor. And again, you're just not going to get that in an online class environment. And another thing is I find myself increasingly distracted with the online class versus when I was at the in-person one, my time and attention was fully dedicated to what was in front of me. Whereas with the online class, I have so many distractions around me. Maybe a family member calls me, my cat meows in my face. There's just a million distractions fighting for my attention. It is early to say though, so if you're curious to learn more about my experience comparing the in-person and online class experience, leave a comment below and maybe I'll do a future video on that. So how are these classes different or better from your typical art school classes? Well, for one, they're a third, fourth, or even much more cheaper than an actual cost of one art school class. And part of that is because it is much shorter. Most of my art school classes were 16 weeks, so 4 to 5 months long. So a longer period to really dive in, learn a lot of things, and then work towards a larger project at the end. Whereas these ones that are 6 to 8 weeks, it's much shorter. You can look at that as a pro or a con. I personally like that because I would much rather work in a focused sprint and really focus on something and then move on rather than dragging it out, because I don't believe that the longer you work on something means it's better. Sometimes short bursts of focused time actually leads to better results. The one thing to note is a lot of these are going to be a lot more introductory, whereas when you are going to art school for a specific program, there might be different levels. For example, when I went for graphic design, I had to take 4 classes in package design and typography, each one building on the other. So with a lot of these continuing art education classes, they're going to be more introductory or intermediate. But again, if you're learning something for the first time, or you're just trying to improve on a particular skill, that's enough to get you going. And then some of the other tips that I'll share later will help you dive more into that advanced area and progress further. I also want to mention some of the psychological differences of doing an optional continuing art education class where the focus isn't on grading. There's no grading or pass or fail. It's totally voluntary. You don't want to show up, you don't have to. In theory, you can do that at art school too, but I don't know why you would waste your money. But this is voluntary. You enrolled in this class because you want to learn a new skill. So the environment feels different. There was a variety of people in the class, from those who were attending the university and just tacking this on as another class to explore a different area. There were some people much older who joined the class with a friend as something fun to do, and then there was me on the side who was taking it way too seriously. There's a big variety of people at all ages and skill level, which is interesting, but what I realized about myself is how much different I was showing up for this optional voluntary class compared to when I went to art school. I mean, you have to remember it was a different time. I started art school at 17 going on 18. I was a much different person, more shy and reserved, and honestly just following what my instructor told me to do. So I just show up a lot more differently now. And this is something that if you are considering going to art school today, or really any higher education, something that I would highly recommend and wish I did more back then is to really take control of your education. Don't just blindly follow your instructors, and try to take the project and make it your own. There's a lot of things that you will do in art school that you don't want to do, but you have to because you need to check off an arbitrary box to complete the class and earn that degree. But in all reality, all that art school is developing the skills and working on projects for your portfolio, which will then help launch you into your dream creative career, whatever that may be. So take control and create projects that you're proud of and will lead to the work that you actually want to do outside of art school. And that's exactly how I showed up for this class. I specifically chose subject matters for the comics I worked on things I was interested in, and made them my own. Also, as an adult, paying for your own education, you just tend to take it more seriously, for some reason less than when you're accumulating student loans on the side. When you're actually putting that money down, you think more about what you're doing with it. The second key element to this building your own MFA is one-on-one coaching. I started working with a coach who has published her own graphic novels. Learning from this experience is huge. Coaching, consulting, just working one-on-one with someone gives you personalized feedback that you just can't get in a classroom environment. It's all about your specific goals, roadblocks, and questions. When you're in art school, you will usually be in a group of, well, for me, it was about 12 to 15 students. And there's only so much time that the instructor can dedicate one-on-one to each student. Yes, there are group critiques and sometimes one-on-one critiques, but you might get maybe 10 to 15 minutes at most of the instructor's time per class, if that. And I can't stress enough how key this one-on-one feedback time is in developing your craft or whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Honestly, out of everything that I will share in this video, this will be one of the main things that I encourage you to do in creating your own MFA curriculum or just your own path in general. Find creative professionals out there that are doing what you want to do and ask them how you can do it too. Some may already offer some form of coaching or consultation, but even if they don't have anything like this on their website, just find their contact information, send them a kind and professional email saying how much you admire the work that they do. This is a career path you want to take. Do you happen to offer one-on-one coaching or consultation? I'm more than happy to pay for your time. That's the key. You will pay for their time. Don't ask to pick their brain or work with them for free. You just won't get a reply, trust me. And this will also be the most expensive aspect, and rightfully so, because you are paying for someone's time and expertise. If you think about it in the grand scheme of things, of paying for a BFA or an MFA, you're actually saving much more in the long run. And when you do something like this, I definitely recommend to do it for a few months. A 1 or 2 off conversation might be great. For example, maybe you are already an established illustrator and you just need some advice on your portfolio. You want to get a perspective on things that are working, things that could be improved, and so forth. That's an instance where maybe 1 or 2 calls from an illustrator that you admire would be very helpful and give you the action you need to continue. But if you're trying to learn, cultivate a skill, really create something big for the first time, then doing this one-on-one coaching or consulting for a few months will be in your benefit. The third main aspect of creating your own MFA is the self-directed curriculum. At this point, you may be wondering, well, how do I know what to study? I mean, maybe that's why you're considering going to art school, because you know that there's a prescribed program of specific courses that are in an order to theoretically teach you what you need to know to get from A to B. Here's a hack. Go to the website of the art schools and the universities with the programs that you're interested in and look up those programs. Usually they'll have downloadable PDFs, or it'll at least be on their website, and you can actually read the description of all the classes that you would be taking for that program. Take note of that, and that becomes the curriculum that you design for yourself. But here's the best part. You get to pick and choose which one of those you actually want to pursue. Remember, in art school or school in general, you're going to be forced to learn and do a lot of things that you might have no interest in making a career out of. But here's where you can take control of your education and just focus on what you want. For example, for the illustration and visual storytelling program at the School of Visual Arts, I noticed they had a couple of classes in painting, which is something I have no interest in pursuing. Yes, I like to use paint here and there, but I have no interest in learning how to paint realistically, nor do I think it will help me in my goals. But I did see writing workshops, and even though I feel pretty confident about how I write already, that reminded me how crucial written storytelling is in graphic novels. So instead, I can improve through reading books on the subject matter and practicing. For a few months last year, I'd really immersed myself in books on the subject of graphic novels and comic making. Some of the ones that have really helped me and that I recommend are Understanding and Making Comics. These are by Scott McCloud. These are really great on telling you storytelling secrets of comics and graphic novels, and it's also drawn in the form of comics. I highly recommend reading all of his books. 2 other books that I found really helpful are The Drawing Lesson and The Comic Book Lesson. And even though these are geared more towards a younger audience, I really connected with how simple they broke down key concepts in little stories as they were teaching the kids in these books how to draw their own comics. Another great one is this one, How to Draw a Graphic Novel. I love how this one is designed. It has a lot of great instruction on things like the basics of working on comics, from layout styles, page formats, panels, dialogue, discussing things like analog versus digital tools, lettering, how to get published, and then also some great advice from creatives out there. Another book that more recently I'm reading, and I'm about halfway through this one, is The Field Guide to Graphic Literature. I personally am not at all drawn to comic book style comics. I'm just not interested in them. I like more artistic graphic novels, a little bit more abstract with their storytelling. And what I love about this book is it's exploring different ways of approaching comics and graphic novels in a more poetic sense. The key here is you really want to immerse yourself in the subject that you're studying. Read instructional books on how to do the things that you're trying to learn. So all of those things that you mapped out from the curriculum you saw on those programs. Take advantage of your these were all library books that I checked out and read. I didn't spend money on them. Search for and check out a bunch of books from your local library on the subject, and also immerse yourself in the medium. So for me, that means reading a lot of graphic novels. One of the things I did last year was, as I was reading graphic novels, I would actually take photos of things that I loved. I also took notes of things that I didn't like so much. I was essentially collecting things that might become part of my future graphic novel style. Maybe it's the way someone used panels or drew characters or included dialogue, how certain full page spreads were used, taking little snapshots of things that I loved and taking notes on why. And then I can go back and look through those notes later. So last year I focused a lot on my own self-directed studying through instructional books and reading graphic novels, taking notes, and so forth. And at the turn of the year, it's been 3 months of solid focused time on learning through the in-person online class and one-on-one coaching, as well as my own practice and projects in between. And even though it's only been 3 months, which isn't a lot of time, but it's been focused, dedicated time on one particular subject, I can honestly say I've learned so much more in those 3 months of learning and doing the work than I have in an entire year of art school. And I can say that from experience. It's also been a lot of fun and really enjoyable for me. This is how you know when you're on the right path, when doing the work on a day-to-day basis is fun. And best of all, I can pause when I need to so I don't burn out. I can move between times of deep focus and rest. That flexibility is priceless. So I've mentioned a lot throughout this video, and now if you're wondering exactly how to build your own DIY MFA, here's the basic framework. Step 1 is to identify the goal. What do you actually want to create or achieve? And really take time to think about this. So many people go to art school or higher education in general with a vague idea of thinking that this degree will help me achieve my dream creative career, when often that's not the case. Instead of thinking about the noun, whether that's graphic designer, illustrator, filmmaker, think about the verb. Think about the things you have to actually do and create in order to become that noun. You want to make sure that you enjoy that day-to-day process in order to create a fulfilling career. So get really specific on this because it's going to inform the curriculum you design for your own MFA program. Step 2 is to map out the skills. What do you need to learn or improve to get there? And remember, the hack there is to go research into all of these BFA and MFA programs, study the curriculum, highlight things that interest you that you want to learn, leave out the rest, but also don't let that hold you back. If you have a curiosity, follow that. For example, maybe you really want to focus on illustration, but you're also drawn to animation, where normally if you were going to art school, you would have to choose one major, so include both. Be sure to focus on one at a time and then build on those building blocks later. This will help you carve out a unique niche that helps you stand out. The third step is to find a feedback loop. Whether that's classes, coaching, or critique, don't go it alone. This is very important. I know so many artists and creatives, like myself, tend to be very introverted and we just want to lock ourselves in our room and create all day, or at least I do. But you can't do that. You need to share your work with others. Get feedback and critiques from those who have experience and are in the industry, and also sharing your work more broadly. Because if you actually want to sell your work, however that may be, whether that's illustration, design, graphic novels, other people, the audience that will see it, they need to understand it. And if they don't, then you know it's something you need to work on. So get in the habit of sharing your work early and often. You will learn so much from this process. And the fourth and final step is to work in projects. Don't get stuck endlessly studying. Create real projects. Essentially, this is all that art school is. Yes, there is a little bit of theory and practice in the beginning, in the first couple of years, or in the beginning of a semester's class, but most of it is working on real projects that you will put in your portfolio. But you don't need art school to do that. Instead, you can create your own real-world projects and focus on the type of work you want to do. For example, maybe you really want to design or illustrate illustrate or photograph for the music industry. There's actually a really great graphic designer here on YouTube, Kel Lauren. I'll leave a link to their YouTube channel below. They solely focus on creating posters, album packaging, and merchandising for the music industry. It's a great example of going really deep on one subject matter if that is what you want to make a career out of. Let's say you're an illustrator and you really want to get into publishing, then work on projects where you're redesigning the book covers of some books you love. Create a super targeted portfolio of projects you love and make that be what you practice on. Instead of one-off illustrations, focus on these larger projects and think in series. Repeat this cycle as needed, tailor it to your pace, your lifestyle, and your creative goals. So, can you teach yourself art? I think so. And if you do it with intention, curiosity, and commitment, it might just lead you somewhere better than you imagined. Let me know in the comments, what's your creative goal right now? And what steps can you work on this month to help you achieve that? And if you want to follow along as I keep building and going through my own DIY MFA, be sure to subscribe because I'll be sharing more of my process in future videos. And if you're looking for your next graphic novel read, then you might want to check out this video where I share some of my most highly anticipated graphic novels for the year.